Hi, one and all. So, in the previous class, we covered about the sequence and flowchart. Particularly, we learned when we can able to use sequence and when we can able to use flowchart, right? And we also covered how we can able to use control flow activities like assign, break, while, do while, for each in a sequence, right? Or inside a sequence, correct? So in today's class, we shall start with chapter number 4, which falls under unit 2, and the chapter is titled as data manipulation. As the name itself says, the main objective of this chapter is learning how we can able to manipulate the data, or it is concerned with the process of changing the data in the memory. Examples for changing the data in the memory, like adding two numbers, subtracting, multiplication, these are examples for manipulation of data. That is the main objective. That is what you will learn in this chapter. So we shall start the journey of this chapter. So this is the roadmap to learn how we can able to process the data in the memory. First, we shall learn about the variables, and then we shall learn about the collections, then arguments, clipboard usage, data scraping, and handling files, and we shall see an interesting data structure called data table. So in today's class, just I will cover the first two objectives or outlines. One is variable. We shall see about variables and its scope, and we shall see about collections and how we can able to store the data in the arrays, and how we can able to process each item stored in the array. We already have learned this in the previous classes. Just once again we shall go one level below, or we shall learn few good practices that we need to follow when we are dealing with variables and collections in today's lecture. Clear? Okay, before understanding about variables, so we need to understand one fundamental or very important concept about memory. Memory of a computer. So usually memory of a computer or a smartphone usually is represented as a collections of cells like this, or a collections of cells like this, or basically it's nothing but a block of cell. This all these are examples for memory. And according to the author, memory is basically can be defined as or it can be defined as, usually it is a block of memory cells, right? And each memory cell will store the data in the form of zeros and ones. I mean each cell has a capacity to store only one bit of the data. Means it can store either 0 or 1, either 0 or 1. So that's what the author is telling. So once again I will repeat, memories is nothing but a collections of cells, and each cell has a capacity to store one bit data. Hence it can store either 0 or 1, right? And another important point that you need to remember about a memory is each cell will have unique address, it seems. Why we need unique address? Simple. If we have an address, we can able to fetch the data present or the bit present in that cell, correct? So a real world example is why usually we will have our home address in order for identification, right? Suppose if you want to tell your where actually you are locating to your friend, usually will use address, right? So similarly, exactly even here, memory, I mean particularly cells in the memory will have unique address, and the responsibility of that address is to fetch the bit present in that respective cell. Clear? Okay, now we shall, with that introduction, we shall go ahead with the variable. We already have seen variable, right? Basically a variable is just a name given to a chunk of memory cell, or make it simple, to a block of memory. So purpose is to hold the data. Means just a variable is just a name. For example, if I consider this as a block of memory, a variable is just a name given to this block of memory, and the purpose of doing that is to store the data in this block. This is what he's telling. So variable is just a name given to a block of memory. Either the block size can be 16 or 18, it depends on the data type. We shall see about data type in today's class only, right? And the author is telling that you can declare a variable with your with your desired name, like you can give an variable name as a small a or capital A or simply C or temp, something like this. And can create variables, as I said, to store the data, right? But a usual practice or recommended practice is you should give meaningful names for the variable, it seems. If you need a variable to store a name of a person, then give the particularly a name of a person called Andy. Then you give a variable name as Andy itself, so that it will be meaningful. So if you follow this recommendation, then what is the advantage that you will get is it improves the readability of the code, as well as it helps to debug the program. Correct. So this is what the author is recommending. So you can give any desired name for a variable, because anyhow it is just a name given to a block of memory. But you don't do like that. You follow a recommendation or a good principle. What is that principle is to, whenever you create a variable to store type of data, always give a meaningful name to that variable, so that it at least it will give a clue what actually that variable is holding, right? In this case, we have created a variable called Andy. So by looking at this name, we can at least we can able to understand, oh, something that variable is holding something about the person or particular name of the person, like that. Clear? Okay, now as I said, we variable is the main purpose is to store the data, but in reality, usually data will be of different type. We have already seen a data of type MP3 file. Nothing but audio. A data can be in the form of a text. A data can be in the form of a string or numbers and so on. So in order to deal with this, people have come up with a concept called data types. What actually data types convey? Just it will convey which type of data that you are dealing with. Clear? Clear? Or in other way, according to the author, a particular type of variable can hold only that type of data. This is the definition given by the author. Make it simple. Data type reflect reflect the type of the data which you are dealing with, or which it can store. Clear? And if there is a mismatch between the data and the variable type, obviously you will get an error. I will give an example for this in the coming classes. You no need to worry. You already have seen an example, I think, even in for this in Java or in C. For example, can you able to assign a value of a variable uh, of type employee to an integer variable? Let us assume E is an variable of type employee. Can you able to assign employee variable to an integer variable? No, because this is holding a different type of data, and A can hold only whole numbers. This is what he is telling. We shall see an example for this in the coming classes. Clear? And now we shall see at a high level which are the different types of variable that you can have in UiPath Studio. You can have a variable of type integer, which can hold whole numbers, numeric numbers without decimal. And you can have a variable of type string, which can hold string values, and remember, the string value should be enclosed within double quotes. And you can have a variable of type boolean, means it can hold either true or false inside it. And there is an interesting data type called generic, which can hold any type of data. We shall see this with an example itself. All this with an example in the coming classes. But at this moment, remember, in UiPath, you can have a variable of type integer, you can have a variable of type string, you can have a variable of type boolean, and you can have a variable of type generic. At this moment, we shall see an example for all this in the coming classes. And next, what the author again it is recommending that give a meaningful variable. Give a meaningful name for a variable specifically, because as I said, it uh, helps someone to understand the code, as a result it will makes debugging job easier. Like see here, author is telling that these are all examples for good names for a variable like flight number, car color. By looking at this name itself, we can say that, oh, this is a variable which is holding information about the car color, something about flight number. But if you give variable name like called temp or data, days, d range, it is very difficult. For example, if I take temp only, it is very difficult to say that whether it is holding a data with respect to temperature or something about temporary data. So that is what the author is telling, that always whenever you create a variable, try to give a name for that variable in such a way that that name should be meaningful. Clear? So now we shall go ahead with the scope. I think you have heard the word called scope even in C or in Java, like a global variable, local variable. Exactly, even here, scope is concerned with where or the region under which the data has its effect or availability. Make it simple. Scope reflect where actually the data is visible or variable is visible or it can be accessible. Visible is nothing but accessible. I will give an example for this. You no need to worry in the coming class. Okay, I will give a simple example at this moment itself. For example, let us assume we have an workflow. Inside that workflow, we have a sequence. And this is our workflow. And we already have seen in the previous classes itself, a single workflow can have n number of sequences. Let us assume there is one more sequence called S1. There is another sequence called S2. And let us assume we have created a variable called X, and we have created a variable called Y in this sequence called S1, and we have set the scope of variable X. We have set the scope of variable X only in only sequence S2. It means what? This X variable is accessible only inside the sequence S2. It can't be accessible inside the sequence S1. It can't be accessible inside the workflow. I mean here. Okay, similarly, if you have created a variable called Y, and if you have specified the scope of this variable as sequence S1, then it is accessible or visible only inside this sequence S1. It can't be accessible either in S2 or in workflow here. Clear? This is what the scope of variable means. We shall see an examples for this even in for this also in the coming class. And the recommendation, see, we shall see a recommendation here. You can choose the scope of the variable according to your requirement. Okay, that is true, and try to limit as far as possible. This is the recommendation, means you can set the scope of this variable X to the workflow itself, and even here the scope of Y as the workflow itself, but it is not recommended. So what the author is telling, that try to limit as far as possible, means if this variable X is needed only in sequence S2, then don't set the scope of this variable X to the workflow. Instead, you set the scope of this variable X to S2 only. S2 only. This is what the recommendation is telling. I hope you understood this. So with that, we shall continue. So we already have seen example for this is nothing but a variable panel where you can create the variables and you can specify the data type and you can specify the default value. This is interesting. This is the scope. Whether you can specify the scope as a sequence or you can change the scope to the flowchart. Clear? Clear? Okay, here workflow means you can treat this as also flowchart also, no problem. Clear? So workflow means the complete it is concerned with the complete I mean it includes the entire I can say steps present to do the task, or you can take flow chart also, no problem. Don't get confused with the workflow flow chart. Clear? Okay, we already have seen this and we have already learned how we can able to connect a message box to the start node. This is another way. You can right click on this message box and you can choose set as start node, like that. We have seen this. Now we shall see about the collections. Collections, we already have some information about collections. Before going directly to collections, we shall see at a high level, you can have different types of variables, it seems. Means generally, you can have a variable of type scalar, or you can have a variable of type collections, or you can have a variable of type tables. Okay, now we shall see at a high level what is scalar type variable means, what is collection type variable means, what is table type variable means. See, as the name itself says, scalar variables are the one which can hold only single data. I mean single data, like for example age, name, all these are examples for single data. And the data types which falls under scalar, or which can be used for creating scalar variables are character, integer, double, okay, and so on. And collections are nothing but a name given to hold, or to hold, I mean similar or more, generally more than one data point particular, and all data points should be of similar type. We shall see an exception case for this also in the coming classes. And examples for collections are arrays. I think you people are familiar with the arrays. Okay, you are not aware of list. I think in Java there is also a concept called list, and even dictionary is also there. We shall see about list and dictionary even here, I mean in UI path. Clear? And this is interesting. Tables, as the name itself says, it is used to hold a data in the form of table, right? I mean rows and columns, rows and columns. We shall see again this in the coming classes. So the bottom line is, generally variables can be classified into three types. One is scalar variable, collection variable, table variable. So depending on the requirement, you have to choose whether your variable should be scalar, whether your variable should be collections, whether your variable should be tables. So make it simple. If you need a variable to hold one data like age and name, as I said, you can go ahead with a scalar variable. And if you need a variable to hold homogeneous collections of items, like for example, what we can able to say, for example, USNs of the students of fifth sem and ISE. I mean, you are dealing with the homogeneous, like collections of USNs of the students. Then you can go ahead with the collections type of data. And if you are dealing with the tabular form of data, like rows and columns, okay, then you can decide that you need to go ahead with a variable of type tables. Clear? Okay, now with that we shall continue with the collections. So we already said that all, or understood that collection is nothing but a name given to hold more data points or similar data points. That's what here the author is telling, that all the data must be of the same type. An example for an array, collection is an array. Clear? And remember, it is an fixed data type. Means once you choose the size of an array, like 3 or 5, then in during the runtime you can't able to add or remove any values in that array. We shall see an example for this even in the coming class. Means this is same as in C, right? As in C, once you declare an array, then the size of that array will be fixed. You can't able to like increase the or decrease the size of the array. That's what here it is saying, increase or decrease the size of the array during runtime. We shall see, don't worry, we shall see a practical example for this also in the coming class. And there is an data type called object, it seems. And if you have an array of type object, then you can hold different types of data also, it seems. And here the author is telling that it's an exceptional case. Don't worry at this moment about this object data type. Okay, you shall see with a practical example in the coming class, when you can have an collection of type object, and why people come up with a collection or a data type called object. Clear? So I think even in the previous class itself, I have shown you how we can able to create a variable of type array inside this variable panel, right? Correct now. So here we are dealing with an array of type integer, clear, and whose default value is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then they are using for each in order to process all the elements in an array called ARR. right? And what actually they are trying to do, they are trying to display every item present in the array called ARR, right? So this completes today's class, and as I said, in the coming class we shall go ahead with an arguments. Particularly we shall see what its purpose and use and so on. So thank you one and all.